This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, Carmen CJ, Rune Scribble, Legendary Ray Ray, Ash, Kitsu the Kitsune, Justice Dragor, and Arctic Ace, and brought to you by Normandy 1998 who requested this topic. If there is a video you want me to make, just head over to Patreon or become a channel member, and select the Pickled Producer tier, since among other benefits, you'll get to make a video request every month, be it the continuation of an existing series or a brand new story. Now, before we get into today's story, I just want to ask you to do me a favor. Hit that like button, since it tells YouTube you like what I do, and check whether you're subscribed, since more than half of my viewers aren't, and it's a free way to keep up to date with all my content. In return, I'll do all I can to keep making regular quality content for you. Thanks, and let's hop in. Sonic the Hedgehog, better known as Sonic SatAM, is one of the most popular and well-regarded Sonic TV series to this day, largely due to its more serious and dark tone and theme, trading the wacky, carefree style of its predecessor, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, for a story in which Sonic and his friends, including Tails and series original Princess Sally Acorn, are the last bastions of freedom in a world already conquered by a much more competent and sinister Dr. Robotnik. In my opinion, such a series would perfectly fit another fan-favorite aspect of the Sonic franchise, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic's serious, sometimes brooding counterpart, who isn't afraid to make decisions the blue blur wouldn't. Now, before we continue, it's probably worth addressing the Mobian elephant in the room. Shadow did not exist in 1993/1994 when SatAM was airing, which is why he obviously could not have been in the show. However, with the magic of more than 30 years of hindsight, and the fact that this is a what-if, moving forward we're going to act as though either SatAM's production got pushed back by a decade, by which point Shadow's popularity was already well established and he absolutely would be used in the series, or else that Shadow was one of the many characters created for the show, similar to Uncle Chuck, Snively, and the Freedom Fighters. Either way, the next logical question becomes how to implement Shadow into the show, since unlike most Sonic characters, his backstory is incredibly important to his motivation and actions, so he cannot simply be transplanted in as another citizen of Mobius. Fortunately, I think there is a way that this could be done very easily, since while it never made it into the show explicitly, there is some lore that the writers used for context about the world, which if considered canon, could be an excellent way to bring in Shadow. To best explain this piece of lore, let's use a quote from Ben Hurst, one of the main writers of Sonic SatAM. As I recall, Julian and Snively were part of a space expedition from about 2200 or thereabouts. Julian attempted a takeover of the colony, but his technology got out of control and he wound up destroying everything, narrowly escaping with his and Snively's lives. Meanwhile, back on Earth, a nuclear holocaust had destroyed human life as we knew it, and the animals who survived mutated into sentient beings and built the society which you see in the form of Mobius. Einstein's ideas of the passage of time during faster-than-light space travel kick in, and thousands of years have passed by the time Julian and Snively returned to find this animal world. Well, Julian's thought was in the land of the four-pawed critters, the two-handed man is king, and so he set about to take over, as outlined in Blast to the Past. So from this, we can conclude that not only did humans exist, but they were also more than likely in a state of either hot or cold war before their nuclear annihilation. Such an environment could very easily give rise to Project Shadow much like we see in the games, with it being possible Julian Robotnik's family, Dr. Gerald and Maria, were still involved in Shadow's creation and upbringing. However, also like the games, calamity would strike in this timeline, with soldiers, presumably from the enemy faction, raiding the lab and taking Shadow and Dr. Gerald into custody, while killing everyone, including Maria, though not before she would impart her dying wish to let the people of the world live happily. Subsequently, Shadow would be placed into stasis, though instead of a 50-year suspension, he would spend millennia on ice, with this ironically keeping him alive long after his captors are destroyed and the world begins anew as Mobius. Now that we have the how, the next important question is when should Shadow be introduced, since this will impact his role in the series. While at first I considered either Sonic and the Secret Scrolls, with the twist being that the lost treasure of the ancient city is actually Shadow's pod, or Harmonic Sonic, since you could replace Robotnik's spy satellite with the Ark, I ultimately felt that Warp Sonic was the best episode to bring in Shadow. For those who don't remember, that's the one where Sonic, Sally, and co discover Lower Mobius, a peaceful underground city powered by a crystal that is losing its energy, forcing the Lower Mobians to search for and ultimately steal an alternate power source. In this timeline, the crystal would instead have formed around Shadow's stasis pod, meaning it would not be fading, as Shadow's innate energy would keep it active indefinitely, though when Sally would use Nicole to scan the crystal as she's never seen a power source like that before, the results would reveal there's a living creature trapped inside. This would create a sticky ethical dilemma for the Freedom Fighters, since to release the trapped lifeform would doom Lower Mobius as they'd suddenly be without power, but to do nothing and allow the Lower Mobians to keep using this creature as their battery would doom him to an unending half-life of enslavement. This would weigh heavily on the heroes as they consider the needs of the many against the rights of the few, though considering that they stand for freedom against an enemy whose primary method of terror and control is to strip the people of their bodily autonomy, their choice would be inevitable, as they would vote to free the creature in the crystal, while also volunteering to help the Lower Mobians relocate to Knothole so they aren't left to fend for themselves. Accepting this, Griff, the leader of Lower Mobius, would help the heroes to break the crystal and open the pod within to reveal a black and red hedgehog. In an attempt to ease his awakening, the freedom fighters would greet Shadow and try to explain the situation to him, though unfortunately they would not get far, as in his disorientation, the newly awakened hedgehog would mistake his rescuers for the ones who put him in the pod in the first place and go on the attack, showing that even while half asleep, he is still the ultimate life form. This would result in a brief skirmish with everyone but Sonic falling immediately, though after a few back and forth clashes, the blue blow would go down too, creating the first seeds of a rivalry between the hedgehogs, while Shadow would flee to the surface. This would put him right into Robotnik's crosshairs, though after his SWAT bots would try and fail to apprehend the black and red rodent, the dictatorial doctor himself would attend to the issue, and recognizing the physical similarities between Robotnik and his creator, Shadow would slow down long enough to speak with the man. Using his advanced intellect, Robotnik would quickly piece together Shadow's situation, and seeing a way to capitalize on his confusion and fractured memories after so long in hibernation, he would present himself as an ally, before bringing the hedgehog back to his fortress so they could begin plotting their revenge on the freedom fighters, who Shadow would be led to believe are the current face of the faction who imprisoned him and killed Robotnik's family. Subsequently, Shadow would take on the role of Robotnik's chief enforcer, as while SWAT bots would still work as generic enemies for the freedom fighters to destroy, this would put a face to the villainy the heroes are trying to stop, while also creating an antagonist who can actually enact the evil plans. As while Robotnik would remain the primary antagonist, Shadow would be the action-oriented foe directly initiating conflicts, who Sonic and co would need to physically battle against in order to achieve their goals. This would become apparent in the next episode, Subsonic, as when the freedom fighters go in search of the green water to save the great forest from Robotnik's pollution, they would come across Shadow, who has been tasked with figuring out what's impeding the Doctor's drilling platform. Surmising that it must be these pests, he and Sonic would fight it out once again, though this time their clash would end in a draw, as with the arrival of the Kraken King, Shadow would have his answer and so would return to Robotropolis. However, now he would carry with him the knowledge that not only is Sonic improving rapidly, but that this loudmouth may genuinely be a rival to him, something he never imagined was possible. This idea would be put to the test a few episodes later in Game Guy, when Robotnik lays his trap to get rid of Sonic specifically once and for all. Instead of building an elaborate base with a pinball theme, he would simply create an arena for Shadow to fight him, and after luring the Blue Rat there, would sick his chief enforcer upon him. Like their previous clashes, this would prove inconclusive, as the pair would be evenly matched, going back and forth in a flurry of high-speed moves and acrobatic combos that would no doubt thrill viewers but infuriate Robotnik, as he'd been counting on his grandfather's creation to squash the hedgehog like a bug. As a result, he would activate his failsafe, a portal to the void like in canon, as unbeknownst to the black and red hedgehog, he'd been planning to roboticize Shadow once the freedom fighters were defeated anyway, so if he needs to be sacrificed early to ensure Sonic is also dealt with, then that is more than an acceptable trade-off for the Doctor. Like with their fight underground, the appearance of this portal would force Sonic and Shadow to call a halt to their battle, but this time instead of Shadow simply skulking off with a scowl, Hero and Sonic would need to work together, with it coming as a surprise to them both they would actually make a very good team. Nonetheless, once they escaped the arena, they would waste no time going their separate ways, with Sonic reuniting with his friends while Shadow would return to Robotnik's lab. However, this is not to say that nothing's changed, as the Ultimate Lifeform would have some very hard questions for the Doctor when they next meet, namely around why he didn't give him any forewarning about the portal, since he could have been sucked in. Using the manipulative charm that is most associated with the SatAM version of Robotnik, the bald man would assure Shadow that he only stayed quiet because he knew his top agent could handle it. Though, once the hedgehog's fears have been allayed and he has departed, Robotnik would snarl out his anger at the rodent's impertinence, and claim that he is beginning to become more trouble than he is worth. Unfortunately for the Doctor, this incident would not be Shadow's only instance of working against him, as in the next episode, No Brainer, he would subtly assist an amnesiac Sonic to get his memory back, as in spite of himself, he has come to respect the Blue Hedgehog enough to feel that Sonic deserves a better fate than that, especially since in Shadow's eyes, he's not acting against the Doctor who is his ally, but instead against that toady Snively. In doing so, his own doubts would continue to grow, if only a small amount, as a part of him would wonder if perhaps his own memories, especially around his capture, are not as perfect as he had previously thought. Nonetheless, Shadow would still attend Robotnik's command meeting, where the Mad Doctor would announce his intent to begin moving forward with the Doomsday Project, which for Shadow had been a chance to enact his revenge in accordance with the skewed version of Maria's wish his damaged memories and Robotnik's manipulation would have caused him to believe in. To this end, Shadow would willingly accept an assignment to repair the test Doomsday pod in the Great Unknown and capture whoever damaged it, and unfortunately for the forces of good, he would be remarkably successful in both endeavors, crushing Lupe's wolf pack and getting the pod up and running again. However, this would once more bring him into conflict with the freedom fighters, specifically Sally for the first time since she helped free him. In spite of everything he's done, she would feel sympathy for him, knowing how scary it is to be out of place and alone in the world, and so would appeal to his better nature, suggesting he abandon Robotnik and join them, since she doesn't believe he's a bad person at heart. These words, coming from a polite, kind, science-minded young woman, would be enough to give Shadow pause, as he is reminded of Maria, and once more forced to question the validity of his recollection when it comes to her dying wish. Sadly, this doubt would not be enough to turn him against Robotnik and his apocalyptic scheme. As while he would spare the wolf pack, allowing them to link up with the other freedom fighter groups, he would still ensure the safety of the Doomsday pod before returning to Robotropolis and reporting that he had brought the Doomsday Project one step closer to fruition. Pleased with this, Robotnik would give the Black and Red Hedgehog his next mission, to track down the two halves of the Deep Power Stone buried in Droodhenge, with this being something Shadow is especially adept at, as due to the Chaos Emeralds not existing in Sonic SatAM, these would be the most logical alternate power source for him to draw on when using his powers. As a result, he would also have a vague attunement to them, speeding up the excavation as he would need to seek out the scrolls that give the location of the two stone fragments, and so would find the first one very quickly, much to Robotnik's delight. This would in turn force the Freedom Fighters to speed up their attempt to find the second Deep Power Stone. Though recognizing they can't beat Shadow in a direct race, Tails would suggest his trick from canon, with Sonic drawing in Robotnik and faking the destruction of the second stone, while the others find the book and have Nicole translate it. As the Doctor's enforcer, Shadow would also be present for this ruse, and so would know it's a falsehood due to being able to sense the second stone in the vicinity of Knothole, though when the moment comes, he would not reveal this fact to Robotnik. This would partially be a result of sheer pragmatism, as he is still uncertain of the mustachioed madman's trustworthiness, and should the need arise, he can always collect it later, though there would also be a more emotional element at play, as to reveal the truth would spell doom for the girl who had strangely reminded him of Maria, with this realization causing him to hold his tongue. Subsequently, Robotnik and Shadow would depart in seeming defeat, though this would be a minor setback at worst, as with the Doomsday Tower under construction and the main generator ready to power up, Shadow would have his next mission, escorting the convoy of fuel tankers. Like Cannon, Sonic would attempt his diversion, speeding past so the SWAT bots would start chasing him, though recognizing the distraction, Shadow would stay behind to foil whatever the Freedom Fighters' real scheme was. As a result, he would soon spot Sally, Antoine, and Bunny sneaking aboard the tanker, and so would confront them, leading to a follow-up discussion with Sally as she would once more try to get him to join their side, or demand to know if he can't see what Robotnik is doing is evil. Unfortunately, this would only anger Shadow, who would retort that he knows evil, recounting his history with Gerald and Maria, along with their deaths and his capture. So to him, this evil is just repayment for the Professor and his friend. Finally understanding what drives him, Sally would put both her empathy and pragmatism to use, as she'd next question if this is really what they would want, with this only further cementing Shadow's doubt, as he would hear the distant echo of Maria's voice, though reciting a much different wish from the one he recalls. However, this would only last for a moment, and upon its passing, Shadow would remember his mission and attack, forcing the Freedom Fighters to retreat and come up with a new plan. Though, in a twist of irony, this defeat would actually be to the Freedom Fighters' benefit, since due to Shadow preventing the sabotage of the tankers, Robotnik would have no reason to suspect a spy in his midst, instead being focused on commending his enforcer for his perceptiveness. Though, in that moment, Shadow would certainly not feel particularly perceptive, as that strange memory would remain on the edge of his mind, too faint to verify, but too present to ignore. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to either of them, Sally's team would be stealing the plans for the Doomsday Project using Rota's Hover unit, and then beating a hasty retreat, now one step closer to foiling the villain's dastardly scheme. And so would begin the series finale, the Doomsday Project. Thanks to Uncle Chuck still being undetected, the Freedom Fighters would know about the project starting a week ahead of schedule, and would be prepared for the final battle rather than needing to go into it half-cocked. As a result, their initial assault on Robotropolis would be much more successful, with Sally and Sonic making it to the generator room where Shadow would be posted as the final guard. Vainly, Sally would make one last appeal to Shadow's better nature, but it would be too late, as Shadow and Sonic would have already begun their final fight, with this being the culmination of their rivalry. However, as is his way, Robotnik would fight dirty, interrupting the duel partway through, as when Shadow lands a good blow on Sonic, the Doctor would use this moment of incapacitation to suck the blue hedgehog into his roboticizer, having always planned for Shadow to be just a distraction. This would infuriate Shadow, as not only is the Doctor denying him a chance to settle the score and get some emotional catharsis in the midst of his recent turmoil, but also enacting an even more egregious form of the brainwashing snivel he did in No-Brainer which he abhorred. As a result, he would demand Robotnik stop, stating he can defeat the blue hedgehog on his own, though this would only incense the Doctor, as having no need for a defiant tool, he would simply pull Shadow into the roboticizer as well, during all the while that Shadow's usefulness was running out anyway, and he always intended to do this, though now he can meet his end with his little friend. With this, he would activate the roboticizer, and while at first Sonic would attempt to fight it off with a power ring, this would be unsuccessful, as this version of the machine had been built specifically to roboticize him. However, a power ring would not be the only asset Sonic would have, as due to his connection to the Deep Power Stone, Shadow would know Sonic still has the one from Knothole in his backpack, and so would instruct the other hedgehog to give it to him. After all is done, Sonic would be reluctant and suspicious, though when Sally vouches for him, he complies, handing over the stone and telling his faker that if he really thinks he can save them, now's the time. Truthfully though, Shadow would barely hear him, as having freed himself from Robotnik's lies, he would at last be able to recall Maria's true final wish, and realizing his place with the freedom fighters if he is to stand any chance of enacting it, he would channel the power of his connection to the Deep Power Stone to unleash a Chaos Blast, destroying the roboticizer and freeing himself and Sonic. Unfortunately, even this would not be enough to damage the generator and its diamond glass covering, a fact Robotnik would be sure to gloat about as he flees the roboticizer chamber, and while Sonic would want to go after him, Shadow would have a better idea. The other half of the stone is in the Doctor's war room, so if they can get it, they'll have a force of destruction capable of bringing down the entire Doomsday Machine. Liking the sound of this, Sally would give the go-ahead, with the three of them racing Robotnik to the stone fragment, and while it would be a close-run thing, the presence of a few extra metal-eating balloons thanks to their better preparation would allow Sally to slow the Doctor down by destroying his mechanical enhancements while Sonic grabs the stone, reuniting it with Shadow's half and creating their ultimate weapon. However, due to not having had time to retreat and form a strategy, Sonic would not have thought to combine the stone halves into the energy configuration rather than the destruction one, meaning that while they'll get their explosion capable of ending the Doomsday Project and Robotnik's regime once and for all, it seems the three of them will be caught up in it. At least, that would be the case if not for Shadow's connection to the stone, as channeling all the power the ancient artifact can give him, he would lay a hand on Sonic and Sally, and urge them to continue fighting for the kind of world she dreamed of, before initiating chaos control. At once, the two resistance leaders would find themselves amongst their allies outside the city, though Shadow would be nowhere to be found, with the pair barely having time to utter his name before an explosion the likes of which they've never seen would rock Robotropolis. In the aftermath, only desolation would remain, and as Sonic and Sally look at each other, they'd share the same question. Did Shadow make it out in time? Ever the realist, Sally would admit she doesn't know, though contrasting her with cocky optimism, Sonic would assure her that he's certain he did, but he's probably just off on his own since he's too cool to celebrate with them. So be it. One day he's sure they'll meet again, but until that day comes, sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog. And since that's where the show was cancelled, forever denying us a third season and a resolution to its cliffhanger, this is where we'll leave this story. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.